I am 22 years old and I am in $91,300 worth of debt, and I am filing Chapter 7 bankruptcy today. Truthfully, my consumer debt really is not that bad. A lot of people have it a lot worse financially, but
First of all, the person whose judgment led her into this hole, a 22-year-old who can't afford a place to live, has a owes $51,000 on a car. Is she in a suitable state of mind? Has the cognitive capability to make good decisions about bankruptcy? If she's the person who did this to herself by the age of 22? And again, I'm very sympathetic to these students. I believe they've been defrauded, but I believe the appropriate solution when you've been defrauded under any circumstance, the person, the institution from which you should seek compensation for the fraud is the institution that defrauded you. I believe there ought to be a federal cause of action, a lawsuit privilege to sue these universities. They know what they've done. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't like, well, we let in that one student who probably shouldn't have been here, and now he's in debt for the rest of his life, and it didn't do him any good. No, this has been a scheme. This should be a class action lawsuit against the universities and colleges. Harvard alone has an endowment in the tens of billions. It's 40 or 50 billion dollars. There's money there to recoup for paying back these students who were defrauded, and then they wouldn't have the debt, and then they'd be active members of the economy again. That would be a way better place to be. What's Harvard doing with the money? They're not funding their own research because we hear the Harvard researchers complaining that the federal government cut off their federal funding.
I am 22 years old and I am in $91,300 worth of debt, and I am filing Chapter 7 bankruptcy today. I've had such a bad financial burden the last couple years. So after meeting with an attorney and doing lots of research, I realized that filing bankruptcy really isn't as bad as it's made out to be, and it was truly going to be my best bet. I decided to file Chapter 7, and truthfully, my consumer debt really is not that bad. A lot of people have it a lot worse financially, but...
All right, someone else, the person who shared this, posted it up. $51,000 on the car, owes $5,000 on a motorcycle, owes $13,000 on a camper she lives in because she can't afford a house anymore. $12,000 worth of student loans, which are not dischargeable in bankruptcy. $2,200 worth of medical bills, $7,700 worth of credit card debt, $91,000 all told. She's 22 years old. First of all, the person whose judgment led her into this hole, a 22-year-old who can't afford a place to live, has a owes $51,000 on a car, has a motorcycle. Listen, I love my motorcycles. I'm passionate about motorcycle riding, but they are toys. They are toys, especially if you already have a car. A motorcycle's a pretty costly toy. Can't afford a place to live. The person who did this to herself, should she be making any important decisions about her own life? Is she in a suitable state of mind? Has the cognitive capability to make good decisions about bankruptcy? If she's the person who did this to herself by the age of 22? You know, women in general, we've all heard this, they make less than men, right? That's true. Women generally make less than men because they make different life choices, and they don't tend not to work as hard as men. They make less, but they have more debt. Women spend money like crazy. Not every woman, of course, but as a class. Most of the consumer debt in America is held by women. They make less and they spend more. They have these fantasies about a standard of living, like a car she owes $51,000 on. The first car I ever bought new, I just graduated from law school. It was a little Hyundai Excel hatchback. I think I paid $5,000 for it. Brand new. Stick shift. Hand crank windows. No air conditioning. But we just give these people money and they just spend it, and then they get themselves jammed up. And this person asked, why isn't the student loan available for bankruptcy? We hear this one all the time. These students take out all this money to go to school, and it turns out the degree they got does not have sufficient economic value to generate revenue to pay back the student loan. It was a bad investment. They made a bad investment in themselves. And then they want to discharge the loan in bankruptcy. And of course, the reason you can't is because the privilege to dismiss the loan in bankruptcy was given up when the government agreed to back the loan. The reason these students are given these loans willy-nilly is because the lender knows they can't get screwed. The government's backing the loan. So they give the money to anybody. Anybody, no matter how worthless the degree, they'll give you the student loan money because they know it's backed by the federal government. By the way, if the loans were not backed by the federal government, they would be eligible for discharge and bankruptcy. But then guess what would happen? Who would get a loan? Who would get a loan? But if the loans were not backed by the federal government, they would be dischargeable in bankruptcy. But then who would get a loan? Nobody would get a loan. No bank is going to give a $100,000 loan so you can get a degree in gender studies. They know that degree has no economic value. You won't have the means of paying that loan back. And then you can go to bankruptcy. You simply wouldn't get the loan, which, by the way, I would prefer. That should be the system. Let's wipe out 80% of the colleges and universities that are really nothing more than money laundering operations. I think what these colleges and universities do to these students is terrible. If aluminum siding salesmen were doing to elderly homeowners what colleges and universities do to these naive students, they'd all be in prison. They'd all be in prison. I have a lot of sympathy for these students. They're lied to. They're brainwashed into believing that this degree of zero economic value will in fact enable them to live large, pay back their loans, have all the nice stuff. And it's an outright lie from beginning to end. These students are being defrauded. They're being defrauded by these colleges and universities. And then they assume a lifetime of debt that cannot be discharged in bankruptcy. And by the way, that's damaging not just to the student, but the entire U.S. economy. Now these students don't have the financial means to buy a house, buy a car, buy a washing machine. They don't have any income. And they're desperately in debt. It's just a money transfer scheme from poor, naive young students, mostly to college and university administrators who get the money. So I would much prefer to see a system in which, you got to qualify for a student loan. What's your degree going to be in? You got to report your grades to the bank every semester in order to get the next semester's loan installment on your student costs. They want to make a return on their investment. They want to make sure they're making a sound investment in you. So I'm going to ask Grok, what percentage of student loans are given to people who ultimately become doctors and lawyers? A lot of lawyers don't make much money. Grok says 4 to 6%. Then Grok tries to make it sound better. So it says, if you include doctorates, not physicians, which is if you include doctorates, it goes up to 20%. But look at the doctorates, like an educational doctorate. What's the economic value of that? Absolutely nothing. I mean, the net economic value is negative, right? The degree's not worth what was borrowed to pay for it. This is interesting, too. If you want to understand why the universities appear to have become stupid, you have to understand that it's not just appearance. They've literally become more stupid. The average undergraduate IQ has fallen by nearly 20 points in 80 years. 20 points. 20 points is a lot, folks. A 10-point IQ difference is readily perceivable if you're interacting with another human being. You got a couple people in front of you. One's got an IQ of 110. One's got an IQ of 120. It will be apparent. If there's any problem solving involved in the relationship, it'll be apparent which one of those two is brighter, more capable of problem solving. 20 points? 20 points is huge. The average IQ is 100. If you took away 20 points, you'd be down to 80. Mentally retarded is 75. Undergraduate IQ has fallen by nearly 20 points. And you could argue, of course, that college literally makes people dumber and like it reduces IQ points. But I think a big part of the problem is really that we've tremendously expanded the pool of people who go to college. I would argue that maybe 10% of people, in fact, here we have a stat. In 1970, 10% of people had a bachelor's degree. I think that pretty much makes sense. I think maybe 10% of the population is temperamentally and cognitively suited for that higher level of education. Now it's about 40%. So imagine if you expanded any professional sport fourfold, if you increased the number of baseball teams 4 times, or NFL football teams 4 times, or whatever your preferred sport may be, 4 times the number of teams, 4 times the number of players. What do you expect to happen to the quality of play? It would collapse. It would collapse. And of course, we know this from experience because expansion happens from time to time in professional sports. And the quality of play goes down because there just aren't that many people in the population who can play at that highest level. There aren't that many people in the population who can perform at a high cognitive level. And just sending them to college doesn't change them. It doesn't make their IQ higher. You just have dumber people in school. In school, it's simply the problem of expanding. And this is for undergrad, this is for grad, this is for PhDs. I can tell you from personal experience, this is for lawyers. When I went to law school, the legal profession was exploding. It seemed like every college and university was starting a law school because they're cheap to establish and you can charge a lot of money for them. It was a money mill for the colleges and universities. It's not like building a biology research facility for your campus where you need laboratory rooms and equipments and hoods and stuff. You want to start a law school, you know what you need? You need some classroom space and you need some local lawyers who instantly become professors. They're your instant law professors. And you have a law school and you can charge a ton of money. So we flooded the TV show LA Law was on the air, very popular. And all these people got these delusions that, oh, I become a lawyer. It's a license to print money. Well, lawyers were making a pretty good income when it was the small percentage of the population genuinely, cognitively, and temperamentally suited to be lawyers. Like people who were genuinely suited to be NFL players. Sure, they were making a good living. But if you dilute all that with a fourfold increase in the number of lawyers, you're not getting good lawyers. You're getting very mediocre lawyers. I saw it in the legal profession. I bet many of you have seen it in your own professions if there's expansion. Absolutely horrific. And so we send all these people to college. We're sending people to college who can't really benefit from the experience. We're charging them a ton of money. They're getting in a ton of debt. We can't allow them to discharge in a bankruptcy because we're on the hook for the loans. And again, I'm very sympathetic to these students. I believe they've been defrauded, but I believe the appropriate solution when you've been defrauded under any circumstance, the person, the institution from which you should seek compensation for the fraud is the institution that defrauded you. I believe there ought to be a federal cause of action, a lawsuit privilege to sue these universities. They know what they've done. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't like, well, we let in that one student who probably shouldn't have been here and now he's in debt for the rest of his life and it didn't do him any good. No, this has been a scheme. This should be a class action lawsuit against the universities and colleges. Harvard alone has an endowment in the tens of billions. It's 40 or $50 billion. There's money there to recoup for paying back these students who were defrauded, and then they wouldn't have the debt, and then they'd be active members of the economy again. That would be a way better place to be. What's Harvard doing with the money? They're not funding their own research because we hear the Harvard researchers complaining that the federal government cut off their federal funding. Yeah, college should be difficult to get into. It should be. Now anybody can go. But how does that help? How does that help society? How does that help the students? The only people it helps is the corrupt college university infrastructure and the administrators who run it. You know, many of these colleges and universities, the ratio of administrators to professors is 1-to-1. Administrators to actual instructors, professors, associate professors, the whole thing. It's just become a way of fleecing money from young, naive people, put them in a lifetime of debt. So these administrators can have incomes of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. To do what? DEI policies? Yeah, and then, of course, then these students are unhappy. They're unhappy, right? They're in a lot of debt. They can't make the money. The degree's worthless. They feel cheated. But emotionally, they can't turn their anger on their university. That's like their tribe, right? They've been brainwashed into this leftist worldview where the university is part of the royal court of progressive fascism. So instead, they hate us. They hate us because we won't pay their student debt for them. 11 Bravo Crunchy member for 3 months says, can you quickly go over what university endowments are and what they're used for? Well, basically, universities and colleges are allowed to aggregate money tax-free. So it's not taxed, and they'll get gifts from alumni, they'll get government grants, there's various forms of income that come in. and they get to keep it and invest it tax-free. And normally that's what they do. They don't normally spend it. Normally they invest it in the market. But then you have a bunch of, progressive fascists investing billions in the market. They get to influence the market, obviously. And they sit on that money. It generates income for them, interest income, returns on investments. And it just makes them incredibly wealthy. And frankly, to my view, undermines any argument for why there should be federal funding of these educations. The universities have plenty of money. They have plenty of money. And if they don't, are they really a university college that society needs? Really? And they're doing it all tax free.